Well, hello there. That's right. It's me. We're back. It's Monday, May the 4th, 2026, and it is time for episode 37 of season 1 of the War, Sports, Politics, and Dragons podcast. I am Dave, your Nerd Emperor, and as always, will be your host for the festivities. Now, let's get the standard announcements out of the way. As always, you can follow us not just on Spotify, where we began, but on Amazon, Audible, and iHeartRadio as well. Meanwhile, if you want to help us get better tech, pay the internet bill, etc., you can do it through Cash App and Venmo. Each handle is the same, WSPDPOD. We have a Patreon page for subscribers to sponsor us, and it's as cheap as $3 for some of the premium content. It's patreon.com/WSPDragons. You can get freebies there, plus special extra content, so please check it out today. Again, you can sponsor me for as little as 10 cents a day and read all kinds of new stuff. The first 12 chapters of my first completed novel, Love's Crucible, are on there now. Chapter 12 just went up yesterday. The first chapter is available there for free, but you can become a sponsor, read the rest as it comes out, and all my future works as they come out for as little, again, as $3 a month. $3, guys, just $3. You can support a writer who's been writing his entire adult life, literally since I was 18 years old. Now, there are 29, as I've said, 29 novels in the pipeline, so they'll be coming out for years, all for just $3 a month. And I do have an announcement that there will be changes made to Love's Crucible, and you won't be able to see those changes unless you're a subscriber. So you'll get to see the original version. I'm going to go ahead and run all 33 chapters plus the epilogue of Love's Crucible, and then we're going to make a couple of changes to it, and you're going to get to read those in addition to the regular weekly releases. I'm not going to have you guys pay to sponsor me and read chapters of my book only to read them twice and have to pay to read them twice. So they will be available for sponsors, but they will be in addition to the regular weekly chapter releases of future books and novels, such as The Mustard Seed, which we're working on right now, and it's going to be good. It's a matter of sequencing. It's a matter of just changing the order in which things are presented from the novel. That's basically all that is. So I've been mulling over this one particular change for quite some time. We're going to move a little bit of stuff from the middle of the book to the beginning, and then everything from the beginning on bumps back a bit, and it's going to turn out pretty good. I had been thinking about doing that since midway through the rough draft, and I think I'm going to end up doing it. But you're going to get to read the original version of the draft, and then you get to read the so-called final version of it. So anyway, that's enough of that. It's time for the show, and I got to level with you guys. I wasn't feeling good all weekend. Did not do a lot of I didn't really do any show prep. I'm going to go ahead and level with you. I just didn't feel good, and it's just one of those things. So we're going to skip over the war and the sports parts right now, and we're going to go straight to, and skipping politics too, and we'll talk about the Supreme Court maybe in a minute. But right now we're on D&D Challenge Day 11, which is favorite adventure you have run. Now, when I started the 30-day D&D Challenge, it came along with how you got started. Well, you've heard about that. The favorite adventure I ran is set in a similar place. So anyway, the favorite adventure that I ran, to be honest, I've run a lot of them, and I've really enjoyed a lot of them. There was the episode with the bugbears with flintlock muskets. There was the episode at the haunted house. There was the episode where I started a campaign with the deck of many things. There was the episode where, the list goes on and on. I've got a lot of memories from playing D&D and fantasy role-playing games, but favorite adventure I ran. Gosh, that's hard. Well, let me tell you a couple of stories. And I tell you what we're going to do is we're going to make this episode the Dave Tells D&D Stories episode. All right? And we won't be doing it with an English accent, unlike last time, because I don't know if I feel like rambling for so long and prattling on like I do with such an accent to have to contend with as well. Anyway, favorite adventure I ran. Okay, let's talk about some of the ones that I would crowd up into the top 10. We'll start with the bugbears with guns. Okay, on my world setting, Trinith, which you're going to be reading about more and more on the Patreon page, and you're going to hear a little bit about here too, firearms had not been invented. Gunpowder had basically just been discovered, but I'm not telling you by whom. However, since you're listening to the podcast, it was first discovered by a wizard who was working for a bugbear chieftain. And because of it, the bugbears ended up getting flintlock rifles. Or muskets, I'm sorry. Flintlock muskets. There's a difference between a musket and a rifle, and I won't get into the specifics right now. Let's just say that there are rifles that are muskets, but not all rifles are muskets, not all muskets are rifles. There is a little bit of overlap, a very little bit of overlap, because rifling of the barrels didn't come along until muskets had been around for quite some time. So anyway, the party, by this point in the campaign, this would have been around 2019, in the last long campaign I ran, the party had reached levels 9 or 10-ish, and were exploring an abandoned, basically a mountain military outpost from centuries before, as in, it's the year 1302, and the outpost dates back to the 570s. Okay, so if we did this in modern day terms, it would be from something around the time of the Fourth Crusade. Okay, in several decades before the 100 Years' War broke out. That's how far back we're going here. Okay, 7.5 centuries almost. They were sent there to... I forget why I sent them there. I forget what their mission was. But they found themselves in this mountain outpost to look for a certain thing, and were set upon by a half dozen bugbears with firearms. Now, the weapons were such closely guarded secrets that the bugbear chieftain, who was fortunate enough to have them available for use, had sent along a wizard who was an apprentice of the wizard that invented them, had sent along a wizard to guarantee that if the bugbears failed in their mission, that the technology would not fall into the hands of the adventuring party. So what the adventurers did not know was that there was a lower level wizard circling above them in the air, invisible, holding on to a couple of nasty spells. Basically, here's the long and short of it. The combat broke out, and it was a ranged combat because of the position of the bugbears. They were up a couple of elevation levels basically above where the party was, shooting at them, and everybody was exchanging missile fire. Well, the battle went against the bugbears because they weren't as high level and as accurate with the muskets as the party was with their arrows and their damaging spells. So as the bugbears started to die, the wizard suddenly turned visible and dropped a fireball in the midst of the bugbears. And the fireball detonated all of the gunpowder that they had on their persons and caused a massive explosion that blew out a section of the building, but it also damaged the artifact that the party members were looking for, and it created a ripple in time, basically tore a hole in the space-time continuum. And it sent them back several centuries to the time of a demon invasion, and they found themselves on the front line in the ice and snow, battling against demons, and watching as a royal wizard had an elephant fall on her and crush her legs. And for some reason, she never got magically cured of it, and was known thereafter as Agatha the Lame, and she walked with a profound limp from that point on. Now, this happened when she was only in her 40s, so, she wasn't terribly old at that point. But anyway, the long and short of it was, that was one of my more fun adventures. And I even showed the party the DM's notes that I had written and typed up beforehand so that they wouldn't think, well, he's just decided to throw in something dumb at the last minute. I always had a paper trail. I did not spring a nasty surprise on the party members that I hadn't already written out in advance. Because I think that Dungeon Masters, Game Masters, Storytellers, Keepers of Secrets, whatever you want to call them, if their guys are losing a battle and then suddenly Superman appears to save them, it seems a little fishy, and if it's not written into the script, it seems so contrived as to be crooked and dishonest on the part of the Dungeon Master, inasmuch as, well, what's the point of fighting if your guys always win? I literally designed one encounter with that adventuring party that was way above their pay grade, just to show them that not every encounter is something they can win. And they not only lost that battle, but they found themselves tied up together after regaining consciousness. None of them died. I didn't let the bad guys kill them, because they weren't out to kill, although they were evil creatures. They were sent to retrieve something. They got that something. And, one of them decided, well, we're not going to kill them. We're going to let them live because we got what we wanted, and they were just doing their job just as we're doing our job. That was from the same campaign. Okay, so that was instance number one of one of my favorite adventures that I ran. Number two has to be the U series of modules from First Edition Advanced D&D. If you're not familiar with the U series, you should get familiar with them. They're set around the small town of Saltmarsh in Keoland, I believe it is, in the world of Greyhawk. Now, Greyhawk, to me, is a better world than the Forgotten Realms. Yes, the Forgotten Realms is probably the most thoroughly fleshed out campaign setting in the world, because it had the flagship company for role-playing games buying out the homebrew setting of some dude from Canada named Ed Greenwood. I believe he's Canadian. Anyway, they then spent the last 4 decades fleshing it out, in addition to him fleshing it out, because every time he had a wild hair, they paid him for it. And he wrote a novel about it, and quite honestly, Forgotten Realms is too high magic. Okay? I can remember reading an article in Dragon Magazine where Ed Greenwood recounted the possessions and exploits of one of the many dragons that he wrote about, because he had a column that he wrote irregularly called Worms of the North. And in this column, he wrote about, I believe it was a red dragon, that had 10 magic wands attached to its wings. And it would use a magic wand for a various effect and so on and so forth. And I'm like, that's just stupid. That's just really cheesy. And the thing about Forgotten Realms is the NPCs dominate the world. In Greyhawk, the player characters dominate the world. Yes, there are some important personages, like Ayuz the Evil, and King Belvar of Furiondi, and Neroth Gazgal, who's the mayor of Greyhawk City, and, there are a number of other people there of various prominence, like Rari and Bigby and Tensor and Autoluke, all the members of the Circle of Eight, as it used to be before Rari turned traitor and killed a couple of them. But they did not form, and let's not forget Vecna, and they did not form the guts of the whole argument. Now, some of the adventures were focused on things they were trying to do, like Howl from the North and Five Shall Be One was about Ayuz trying to unite the barbarian tribes of the North to work under his aegis in one of his plans of conquest, and it was the job of the party members to foil those plans. But you didn't run into, a high-level adventurer in every dive bar in every small town everywhere. Forgotten Realms is an incredibly overpowered world. Greyhawk is more down to earth, or Orth as they call it, pardon the pun. But anyway, in Greyhawk, in Keoland, is the little fishing village of Saltmarsh. And it's detailed in great length in a chapter in the 3.5 D&D Dungeon Master Guide 2. It's its own city in there, and then, of course, in 5th edition, there was Ghosts of Saltmarsh, a hardcover novel, which revisits the U series. But the very first module of the U series, U1, now this was a module came from the UK originally, and I believe Graham Morris wrote it. I'm not certain. I should know this. As many times as I've run the daggone thing, I should know at least the name of the author. So let me double check that. Whoops, I'm in the wrong folder. If you only knew how many PDFs I had purchased over the years, it's not even funny. Okay, so anyway, Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh is for levels 1 to 3, and it was by Dave Brown and Don Turnbull. And the premise is I'll read you the cover blurb from the module. Desolate and abandoned, the evil alchemist's mansion stands alone on the hill, looking out towards the sea. Mysterious lights and ghostly hauntings have kept away the people of Saltmarsh, despite rumors of a fabulous forgotten treasure. What is its sinister secret? I won't point out that there's an apostrophe in the word "its," and that really breaks my heart because this was sent to us from Britain, and it's the mother language, and they should know punctuation. But meanwhile, and then in the interior, in the module pages itself, it's got that same typo or grammatical error or whatever. But basically, the long and the short of Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh is I had the party walking through a market in town, and some kid was talking about the haunted house over there on the hill. The party decided to investigate, and they found out that, well, it wasn't an evil alchemist's house. It was a former royal mage, meaning that he was the official wizard of a king, and that he had retired to this small town. Now, I moved Saltmarsh into a different city where Trinith. I moved it into Trinith and put it near the capital of Esternon, and had it just a mile or two outside of town on a promontory overlooking a huge Lake Mahir in the center of the kingdom. But the royal mage is basically like the court wizard for the king, and he had retired to this mansion, and no one had heard anything out of him in several years. And then people started to see strange lights and hear weird sounds from the place. So the party decides to take it upon themselves to go looking around, and they find an old spell book that was the Royal Mage's spell book. Well, when they found it, they activated basically a locate object contingency spell. And members of his magical society, who were good but weren't always necessarily the good guys, had decided that they needed to get that spellbook back because it was, part of their little guild organization, and they didn't want just some bunch of random interlopers getting a hold of it because it had rare spells. As in the world of Trinith, there are not just regular languages, there are magical languages. Languages that you do not learn unless you achieve a certain level of magical proficiency. And it might be arcane magic, it might be divine magic, it might be druidic magic, it might be psionics, it might be incarnum, it might be any of the other forms of magic that you may have encountered in various products from various publishers over the years. And let me tell you something, I think I did a file count recently, and I have something like 19,000 PDFs. So, yeah. Shame I can't sell them, but that's not how it works. So anyway, they found this spell book. They also found a cursed item, which they managed to get rid of after a while, but it was a cursed luck stone, and what it did was it gave the possessor a -1 penalty on every die roll. Every die roll, no matter what it was, a -1. And that could be a severe penalty or a slight one, depending on the type of die used. So if you were rolling a D4 for dagger damage and you had a -1, then yeah, there was a minimum of 1 point of damage, but you never did 4. And if it was a -1 on a percentile roll, then it's not quite so bad. But In addition, they uncovered, the party did, a smuggling ring that was operating out of caves underneath the mansion, because under one of the rooms was a trap door that led down into the cellar. And in the wine cellar, there was a secret room where they found the skeleton of the dead royal mage, along with his spell book and his cursed luckstone. And then they found a secret door leading to the caves where the pirates operated. They defeated the pirate band, got a couple of them captured, and found out that there was a ship. And, of course, you know, pirates use ships, smugglers use ships. So they snuck out to that ship in the dark of night one night, took it over, and under maritime rules in the Kingdom of Oberon, they became the owners of that ship. Okay, won't get into the lengthy legalities of it, but long and short it is, it was a criminal enterprise, and they interrupted a criminal enterprise, and so they became possessors of a small ship. They turned it into a bar. They turned it into a floating bar and grill, and yeah, they had some fun with that. But the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh I've used a couple of times in a couple of capacities. The first time I did it, I actually ran the whole U series, which was Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, then Danger at Dunwater, and then the final enemy, wherein the smugglers were smuggling weapons to lizardmen. Lizardmen needed weapons because they were being invaded by Sahagin, or however you pronounce it. It's Sahuagin. I've always called it Sahagin. It might be Sahuagin or something, but they were being invaded by aquatic creatures known as Sahagin, and they needed the weapons. So in the final adventure, the party, actually having already dealt with the lizardmen and found out what's going on, then deal with the Sahagin. Now I'm afraid to pronounce it because I don't want to say it wrong. And that's how the trilogy finishes out. Well, we didn't do it that time. In this case, they were just smuggling booze. Or something. They were smuggling contraband that wasn't weapons for a nearby lizardman colony. I'll say that much. And that was one of my favorite ones. Another favorite adventure that I had was a Ravenloft adventure that I ran. This would have been around 1996-97, back in the heady days of 2nd edition AD&D. We were playing, I think I've mentioned this place before, my friend Jason's house in a neighborhood on Kent Island, Maryland called Kentmore, which is about... Kent Point is the farthest point south on Kent Island. This was about halfway from where US 50 runs to Kent Point. You basically, when you come across the Bay Bridge coming onto the eastern shore of Maryland, you would take the very first exit, which is Route 8. You would go right at the top of the exit and go south for, I don't know, maybe 5 miles, and come to Kentmore Road, and the house was on Kentmore Road. Beautiful place overlooking the bay. It was right on the water, as in they had lost a couple dozen feet of shoreline due to erosion over the years. It was his grandmother's house. His grandmother and her husband had bought the place in like 1953 for like $3,000. And she ended up selling it in the late 90s because she was, in her 70s and not in great health, and moved to a place somewhere else. But before that happened, we played at Jason's house on his back porch so we could close the door, and if we made a little bit of noise, it was okay because his grandmother slept at the other end of the house. But we played Night of the Walking Dead was the module from Ravenloft 2nd edition. It was an introductory module for levels 1 to 3. Now, they were about 3rd level by the time they got to it in my campaign, because what I did was, hold on, let me find that module here. Here it is. It's module RQ1 for 2nd edition AD&D. 4 to 6 players, level 1 to 3. I think we had 6 people, and they were all second or third level. And what they were doing was they were actually in Greyhawk. Well, if you've ever done Ravenloft, gotten people into Ravenloft, what I call the right way, is you're surrounded by mists and fog, and then when the mists and fog clear, things are different. Well, let me see how well I can. Now, this was almost 30 years ago. Now, I've written it down since then on a Facebook page and described it to people, but let me see if I can remember how I did it. Okay. Now, if you've ever run a D&D campaign, more than a few sessions as a Dungeon Master, you've probably used a Dungeon Master screen. And all it is a folding cardboard partition that you put up in front of your pages of notes and your books and dice so that the players can't see the notes. Okay? And they can't see all your die rolls. Now, we'll discuss in another episode whether or not all die rolls should be public, but because they shouldn't. But long and the short of it is, I had a regular 2nd edition AD&D Dungeon Master screen sitting up there. Well, I had packed for this adventure, and let me see if I can remember the descriptive text that I wrote as I sent these guys into hell, basically. They were first level, actually. I'm sorry, they were first level. They had completed one other adventure, but hadn't all hit second level. They were mostly first, some second level. That's what they were. In any event, okay, here's the deal. I had put the party on rafts, along with a caravan that they were guarding. They had to go down a river on rafts to get to their next destination. They were really big rafts. You know, they were like the size of a living room. They weren't just some 4x6 thing that 2 people could sit on and you steer it with a pole or whatever. I mean, these rafts were pretty well jigged out, and they were big enough to hold. One raft was big enough to hold 4 people. So there were like 4 or 5 total rafts, and 2 of them, like the second and third rafts in the little water caravan, were the adventuring party. Let me describe it, how I did it. Okay. First, I made the party all close their eyes. I made all the players sitting at my game table close their eyes and picture this in their head. I said, if you peek, you will ruin what I'm about to do. Do not, under any circumstances, peek while I tell you to keep your eyes closed. I will tell you to keep your eyes closed until a certain point, at which point I will tell you to open your eyes. Okay, I want you to picture this in your mind with your eyes closed. And I made Barry, one of the players at the table, turn off the lights on the porch. And it was dark. So we were sitting in darkness. I said, okay. Slowly the rafts meander down the river. And it's a beautiful but cool night. There's a full moon. And you can still see many stars because the skies are very clear. You can see huge constellations in the sky. Occasionally you'll hear a bat flutter by squawking, and you can hear the other night birds as they chirp and make their noise. You hear crickets. You hear the other bugs of nighttime. The occasional mosquito buzzes by. And then the temperature begins to cool a bit. As it cools down, a fog begins to arise from the waters of the river. The fog gets to be very thick. At one point, it gets to be so thick, you can barely make out the raft in front of and behind you. Then it gets so thick you can't. Now, mind you, these rafts were traveling maybe 20 or 30 feet apart. This is some thick fog. And it gets a little bit colder still. Then a very slight breeze picks up. But you've noticed that you don't hear the night birds anymore. You don't hear the crickets anymore. You don't hear the bats anymore. After a few minutes, the fog begins to clear as the wind picks up a little bit and blows it away. And as you notice, when visibility improves to the point where you can see the distant shore of the river you're on, it doesn't look right. There's something different about it. The trees are different types of trees. Even in the dim moonlight, which you now see is only at 1/4 full and waning, you can make out a lot of differences along the shoreline. And again, it's totally silent. Then finally you hear a few bugs here and there, and things seem to return to normal, but they're still not the same. Something's changed. Barry, turn the lights on. Everyone open your eyes. Well, while I was telling them this, I had pulled out a Ravenloft logo Dungeon Master screen and put it in front of my other screen so that when the players looked at my DM screen, they would see the Ravenloft logo. And that would imply that they were then in the Ravenloft setting, which is a horror-themed campaign setting. It's all about scary stuff, and it's a world where the rules don't work the same as in back in 2nd edition, and this carried over into 3rd and beyond. But in 2nd edition, you could cast a spell called No Alignment, where you would know what someone's alignment is: lawful good, chaotic evil, neutral good, chaotic good, whatever it might be. Well, in Ravenloft, you couldn't tell good or evil. You could only tell lawful, neutral, or chaotic. Some spells like Detect Evil worked in odd ways or didn't work at all. There was a long list of spells that were altered in Ravenloft, a long list of things that were different. Well, when Barry turned on the lights and sat down, I was just sitting at my spot, smiling this huge, wicked grin. And Jason, probably our most experienced player, took a glimpse of the Ravenloft DM screen and immediately yells out, "Oh, fuck me! Oh, fuck me!" Well, Kathy, who was another player, Jean's wife, and was our least experienced player, looked at Jean and said, "Jean, what's wrong?" "I'll tell you what's wrong," Jason said. "We're fucked! That's what's wrong! We're in fucking Ravenloft!" "Well, what's that?" "Oh, God, you don't know?" Well, they then found themselves in the small town of Marais de Tarascon, in the small region known as Soragna. Basically, Marais de Tarascon and Soragna are kind of a New Orleans early 1800s type theme, is how I read it. And very heavily influenced with French stuff. Like, for instance, Marais de Tarascon, Soragna. These names are all sound French, and so on and so forth. Well, I won't detail what all happens, everything that happens in the adventure, but at one point, the party is eating dinner in a tavern, and one of the people in the tavern falls out of his chair dead. And while everyone's watching what's going on and checking on the man, they determine he has no pulse and he's dead. He then gets up and shambles out of the tavern and heads into the town cemetery. During the course of the adventure, they faced a zombie lord whom the adventurers, Jason in particular, were convinced was actually a lich. Now, you got to understand, if you don't play these games, a lich is something that you need to be at least 9th or 10th level to face, because there are certain spells that you need to have if you want to be effective in fighting one of these things. A lich is way above a first level character's pay grade. Okay, way above. You have no business even being in the same zip code as a lich if you're first level. Okay? Your only option is to flee. Well, they thought they were facing a lich because of the things that the zombie lord did. Well, it turns out he wasn't. And they did survive the adventure and completed the adventure. I then sent them on another one in Ravenloft and then put them back on the river, and the mists rose up again, because that's how Ravenloft grabs you. You go through the mists, you go through fog, and whoom, setting change. That's the standard technique. That's the MO of going into Ravenloft. I then sent them into another adventure in Ravenloft before they got back, wherein Kathy's character fell down a 100-foot-long flight of stairs. Yeah, it was bad. She survived, but I made a horrible mistake as a dungeon master. They got into a fight with some mummies, and I forgot that mummies inflict something called mummy rot. And the way mummy rot works in the game is if you have this illness or affliction or curse or whatever you want to call it, your wounds don't heal. Well, they were casting curative spells on one another and drinking healing potions and so on and so forth, and their hit points were healing up all nice and fine, and then I realized the next session, oh, by the way, crap, I screwed it up. You guys were supposed to have mummy rot. Well, I tried to retroactively fix my error, and the players weren't having it. They absolutely were not having it. It was like, that is incredibly unfair. You don't do that. You made a simple mistake. It's not that big a deal. We make mistakes all the time. We just need to move on. We're this is not fair if you do this. Well, they were absolutely correct in that regard. And so the whole affair probably took 5 minutes. So we resolved it quickly, and they were right. And this is one of the things you need to do as a dungeon master. If you make a mistake, you either adapt to it on the fly if you're aware of the mistake that you've made, or if you've made a mistake in a previous session, if it's something that you can discuss with the players, in this case it definitely was, then you need to bring it up. Okay, there are certain mistakes you can make as a DM, like bringing in the wrong creature or making a mistake in your own continuity and plot arc that you can't discuss with the players. But in this case, wherein most of the party got an affliction that prevented them from healing once they even returned from Ravenloft, then yeah, that was not cricket, and that was not fair on my part, so I did that wrong. But I learned as a DM that you don't do that kind of thing. That you adapt on the fly. And the ability to adapt on the fly is the mark of a good dungeon master. And I did not adapt on the fly in that one regard. But the way I handled it, the players were all very happy afterward. They were satisfied that I had made the right choice and so on and so forth. And the adventure went well, and the campaign went great. It was one of those campaigns where they were hired to guard a caravan. The whole premise was you're going to Greyhawk City. You're going through Furiondi into an area near Greyhawk City, going across a river or two to get to Greyhawk City. And then when you get there, that's when the real campaign begins. Well, by the time they got to Greyhawk City, they were all 8th or 9th level. They had already had a campaign without even realizing it. I had fit a campaign inside adventures to lead them to the campaign, in a manner of speaking. Now, granted, they knew that what they were doing was actually an existing campaign, but they actually had more experiences getting to the so-called adventure place than they had in a brief period afterwards. You know what I mean? Proportionally, they had a lot more fun getting there. They say getting there is half the fun. In this case, it was about 3/4 of the fun. So they had a blast, and it wasn't a letdown afterward or anything, but they had their share of fun. And I was very proud of that campaign. The Ravenloft moment was one of my crowning moments as a DM, because I scared the crap out of the best player at the table, the guy with the most experience and knowledge, and he was kind of the leader of the group of gamers, as it were. He was kind of the senior statesman for the group. He wasn't the oldest, Gene was, but he was the straw that stirred the drink. He always played the most magnetic and personable characters and so on and so forth. And everybody really, liked and respected him. And long and short of it is the whole adventure went great, because what other things I did along the way was I had the deck of encounters was 432 cards in a little box. They were index card size, 3x5. And there were, like half a dozen of them were indexes showing the titles of, some of the cards. And then some of the cards talked about what the icons on the cards represented. But there were over 400 encounters all told out of the 432 in there. And some of them were multi-part encounters and some of them weren't. Many were low level, many were mid-level, and a good number were high level. And they had them broken down into that subsection as well. So what I did was I took the deck of encounters before I began the campaign, and I ran the whole caravan portion of the campaign was from the deck of encounters, except for the trips into Ravenloft. Yeah. So, and while I think about it, I don't know for sure what level they all were. They weren't above third, but I don't think actually that they were all first level because of where this river was that they had gotten to. They wouldn't have been first level. They probably would have all been around third. And the way Ravenloft works is, realistically, the modules, if you run them well as a DM, are more challenging than the levels that they show recommended should be. Like, for instance, that module is recommended for levels 1 to 3. Realistically, it's more like levels 2 to 5. If you run the encounters properly, because that's Ravenloft. Ravenloft breaks a lot of the rules of the game in that regard, but it's glorious. It's a wonderful, wonderful setting, and next to Greyhawk of the TSR settings, it's my favorite. I would say in order, it's Greyhawk, Ravenloft, Mystara, which is the default setting for the BECMI D&D series, BECMI, and then Forgotten Realms, and then Birthright. And then after that, you have other settings like, Dark Sun or Kara-Tur, which is really Forgotten Realms, just the eastern part of it. And Spelljammer, which I never played, and Planescape, which I never played. But those are my top 3, I guess you would say, overall moments, or overall sessions as a DM. Now, as a player, Christmas 2018 was my favorite adventure as a player. We were playing at a place called Phoenix Rising Comics and Games, which comics and cards, comics and games, games and comics, Phoenix Rising. Anyway, it was in Salisbury, Maryland. It's closed up now because basically COVID damaged a lot of businesses, and some of them never recovered, and I think Phoenix was one of them. And JD was the guy who ran the store. And JD was cool. Upstairs at the store was a room that he had set aside for gaming. There were, I think, 3 large tables, one of which could be used for fantasy role-playing games. The other 2 were set up for games like Warhammer Fantasy Battle and Warhammer 40K. So they had 2 tables for Warhammer stuff and 1 for role-playing game stuff. And we would go up there on Saturday and start at noon and play until around 4 or 5, depending. That was the campaigns that I ran. The campaigns that another guy named David ran, he ran them on Friday nights and alternated with other people, or he alternated his own campaigns. He played a fair amount of D&D. That was all 5th edition though. I was playing 3.5 in Pathfinder 1st edition when I ran it. But we would go to Phoenix Rising and play, and one of the guys in our group was moving away to, I want to say Arizona? I don't remember where but it was somewhere very far away. Okay, like you can't get there from here, from the rural, tucked away eastern shore of Maryland. It was quite a haul. And he was a player, but he wanted to DM a session. And so he decided that he was going to run a session that was Christmas themed. And the way it was going to work was we were a bunch of adventurers that were sent to deal with some Christmas-related conundrum or problem. And in the final battle, we would fight all of the villains of Christmas, like Krampus and the Grinch and, all these other creatures from history. Adam was the name of the guy that was leaving. I just found the emails from December of 2018 because I save everything. It was called Throlmar was the location. It was the Throlmar Christmas Special Adventure. And he needed somebody to play a certain specific character. That character was Buddy the Elf. And you guys know who Buddy the Elf is. That's the character that Will Ferrell played in the movie Elf. I volunteered. I jumped. I screamed, I am Buddy. I will take care of Buddy. I will do it. Well, I think Buddy's identity was actually secret somehow. I don't remember the process by which I became Buddy. Maybe it wasn't just an open invitation and I was the one that was the loudest. But whatever the case was, I was Buddy, and then when it was revealed who I was, everybody at the table just had this huge laugh. Well, if you're going to role play, then you role play. Okay? Adam had small children, as I recall, and one of the props that he added for this one-shot adventure were gingerbread cookies that you could eat that acted as healing potions. This was a 5th edition adventure, by the way, because I'm looking at the character sheet right now. Matter of fact, let me hold on, let me look at it. Buddy the Elf. Okay, so he was an 8th level half-elven bard, half-elf, that's cute. Alignment chaotic good. And oh boy. He had a +3 sling because remember the snowball fight from the movie Elf. Okay, so he was very good with missile weapons. And I had a ring of spell storing containing a mass cure wounds spell. And a couple of other little goodies. I had a little bit of cleric. I could cast, a couple of things, but not much. Then, of course, bards had spells too. And I had cure wounds, detect magic, featherfall, healing word, confusion, dispel magic, Leomund's tiny hut. Detect thoughts, invisibility, lesser restoration. It was he put a lot of thought into this character, and I will put up this character sheet on the Patreon page for sponsors to look at. This is not going to be a freebie. This one's going to be this character sheet is a very special one, and it's near and dear to my heart. So anyway, I played Buddy the Elf, and when I played Buddy the Elf, I took a picture. I grabbed a screenshot of Will Ferrell in costume from the film, printed it out on my full-color printer at home, and took it with me and wore it as a mask over my face the whole time. So that whenever anybody looked at me, they saw Buddy the Elf. Well, if you're going to be Buddy the Elf, you got to be Buddy the Elf. Well, Buddy the Elf was goofy. And these gingerbread cookies that Adam had created, he didn't make actual cookies. What he did was he and his young son, I believe, who was like 4 or 5, drew out some outlines on brown construction paper of gingerbread men and then cut them out, and then on the gingerbread man on the back he wrote Access healing potion, heals whatever damage. Well, I'm Buddy the Elf, so if I'm going to play Buddy, I'm going to play Buddy. As soon as we got the healing potions, the adventure hadn't really even started, I ate one of the cookies. And when I say I ate one of the cookies, I ate construction paper. Okay? I ate construction paper because that's what Buddy would have done. He would have eaten a cookie. So I physically consumed, I think it was just a leg, but I made the point was made. I bit the leg off of one of these gingerbread men that was made out of construction paper, and I swallowed a piece of paper. I kid you not. And everybody had A great laugh at that. Well, the adventure progresses and things go along, and we have a lot of fun. We get to the climactic encounter where we're fighting, Krampus and the Grinch. Well, the Grinch had a dog. Remember the dog that the Grinch had? That poor little terrier that pulled that incredibly heavy sleigh and that the Grinch just mistreated all to hell. Well, Buddy loves animals. So we got into the point where the combat was about to begin. And again, Buddy is an 8th level bard with a charisma of 20. So he's pretty good at, performance, persuasion, whatever you might want to call it, animal handling. So, animal handling is a wisdom base, but we'll move on. I said, doesn't the Grinch have a dog? Yeah, and he's right there about to pull his sleigh into combat. I said, I look at the dog, and I go, doggy, come here, puppy. Well, I had to make a skill check. I rolled a 20. I aced it. This dog instantly fell in love with me. So I had disabled the Grinch's sleigh in the moment of combat, and he was basically the heavy cavalry that we had to deal with. And Buddy the Elf was a focal point of a victorious climactic encounter to win the Christmas one-shot adventure, basically. To win the battle, I should say, in the Christmas one-shot adventure. You don't win when you play D&D. You win battles, but you don't win the game. If you win, it's because everyone had fun. That's how you win. So anyway, that's how that adventure wrapped up. And that was one of my top 5 favorite moments as a player. I told the story last week of the stupid dwarf and the snotty elf. That was probably number 1. That was back when I was in high school. But that there, the Buddy the Elf encounter with the Grinch and his dog, and I just went, doggy! We were all in stitches for the whole adventure. It was hard to play it with a straight face, but we had so much fun. And as a matter of fact, I did such a good job on that encounter that I gained, what is that term in 5th edition for? Is it you gain advantage? Yeah, you gain advantage, yeah. I gained advantage times 2 for the remainder of the adventure. Well, we were in the climactic encounter, so I only needed to roll 1 or 2 dice, and they were both with advantage. So I took care of business, and the party took care of business, and we defeated the bad guys and, won that big climactic battle and had a capital time doing it. Just an absolute capital time doing it. It was the most fun that I'd had as a player probably since high school, which would have been about 30 years. So that's the story of several of my Day 11 D&D challenge moments of favorite adventure you ran. That's the favorite 5th edition adventure I was part of was that one shot that Adam did. That was amazing. We had an absolute ball with that. And I strongly encourage people, if you don't play D&D, to find a group with veteran players. Don't just find a group of people that play 5th edition. Find a group of people that have played since at least 3rd edition. Okay, find some real veterans. They're out there. There are millions of us. Okay? 5th edition is D&D with training wheels. If you want a game that's got real bite to it, you want to play 3rd. 5th is a great starting point, but so was basic D&D back when I was 12. Okay? 3rd edition is the best form mechanically of D&D. I probably had the most fun in 2nd, but from the standpoint of game design and game mechanics and rules crunch and getting things the most right, I think 3rd edition, 3.5 in particular, did it best. And Pathfinder 1st edition built on that. So I consider 3.5 and PF1E to be the same game, because they're so close as to be almost completely interchangeable. There are a few minor tweaks that Pathfinder used in their rules that Paizo Publishing did when they made Pathfinder that made it the final form of 3rd edition D&D, basically. So, and a lot of people, including myself, refer to it as Dungeons & Dragons 3.75. And I would really recommend that if you get into a group, that you find one online. There are all kinds of places. Now, there was a website called meetup.com where you would meet up with people. David, who ran that and ran some campaigns at that book at Phoenix Rising, had a meetup group for us here on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. He shut it down a few years ago. But there are all kinds of ways online to meet people and find groups. And you can play via Zoom, you can play via Twitch, you can play via other websites. But playing in person is the best. If at all possible, play with people in person. Because it's just an order of magnitude better to be all sitting at the same table, because you can read the body language better. Remember, 92% of all communication between humans is nonverbal. Okay? Only 8% of actual communication between humans is verbal. Everything else is body language and subtle cues. You know? So, get into an in-person game group. Play 3.5 or Pathfinder 1st Edition. Play 1st Edition. Play 2nd Edition. If you have to, play 5th. But it's just not as good. It's just not as good. And I speak from 44 years of experience playing. I know of what I speak. 4th edition, you notice I didn't mention 4th edition. 4th edition isn't worth your time. It just isn't. They tried to do certain things with 4th edition. It just didn't work. And it was not very well received. And it didn't last long. It only lasted 6 years. It had the shortest lifespan of any edition of Dungeons & Dragons. And to be honest, 3rd edition, 5th edition should have been 4th, and 4th as it is now shouldn't have ever existed. Let me put it that way. There will be people listening to this who like 4th edition, and more power to you, but the overwhelming majority of D&D players do not like 4th edition. That's simply the way it is. You know, but that's going to wrap things up. I can't believe I've actually been telling old game stories for an hour. But there were some really funny and fun moments. To delve into sports briefly, I reinforce my opinion that the Baltimore Orioles are done for the year. We are 1 week into May. They were, what was their record? 15-19 when last I looked. They're on pace to win about 73 games. And that's a losing record. They're not hitting. The pitching isn't coming around. And with tonight's game scheduled for 7:05 Eastern at New York against the Yankees, then that's probably going to be a 4-game sweep that they're going to endure at the hands of the team leading their division. So they're done. I said it a couple of weeks ago. I stand by it unless there is basically now we're getting to the point where it's almost going to take a miracle. Because if you get past Mother's Day with a losing record, you don't tend to get far above 500 from that point on. And if they have a losing record at the All-Star break, you might as well consider them mathematically eliminated. In the division that they play in, yeah. So, it's been a long 43 years since the Orioles last won a World Series. They've not, they've made the ALCS a couple times since then. I think 96, 97, and 2014? But otherwise, we've had a lot of lean years as Orioles fans. I can remember 2002. The team was, I want to say, in Toronto in August and split the first game of a doubleheader to get their record to 61-61 or something like that. Let me look it up real quick on Retrosheet. But this is the year that hurts me the most as an Orioles fan. Now, remember, my senior year of high school, when I graduated, okay, let me look this up because Cal Ripken played on both of these teams. The first thing we're going to look at is the 1998 Orioles, or 88 Orioles, I'm sorry, and then we're going to look at the 2002 Orioles. So, no, Cal was not on the 02 Orioles, but I can look them up real quick. Okay, so the 1988 Orioles were 54-107. And the day I graduated, May 31st, 1988, That day, the Orioles actually went to Seattle and played a night game and won 12-5 to improve to 11-39. They were horrible. Remember, they set a modern record by losing their first 21 games. They went almost the entire month of April without a win. They didn't win until a 9-0 victory at Chicago against the White Sox on the 29th of April that year to improve to 1-21. They had a horrible start to the season, and it didn't ever truly get better. I can look at their month by month real quick in 1988. The best month they had was August, where they were 14-15. So they did not have a month where they had a winning record. They had one month where they were one win below 500, but in April they started 1-22. Okay, and they just didn't ever get their wheels under them. So that was a rough year. But 2002, to me, was worse. Because, let's find it here. There it is. August 23rd, 2002, they're at Toronto. They win 11-7 to even their record at 63-63. That was a night game. The next day, which I believe was a Sunday, they had a doubleheader at Toronto. Not only did they lose those two games, they lost another 8 in a row after that. So they dropped from 63 up to 63-73 in a week and a half and finished the year 67-95. So in the last 36 games, the Orioles went 4-32. And they finished the season on a 12-game losing streak. Okay, they had promise on August the 23rd. Let me look at the standings real quick. As of the end of play on August 23rd, they were in third place. They weren't really contending for the division. They were 16 games out of first. The Yankees, I believe, ended up winning the division that year. And they were 16 games behind the Yankees. They were 10 games behind Boston, who was in second place. So they weren't really in contention. But Tampa Bay was 21 games worse than Baltimore in last. Toronto was 10 games worse than Baltimore in fourth. So Baltimore was a 500 team, smack dab in the middle of their division. And they weren't a contender. But at least you had hope that they would salvage a decent season. And then they go 4-32 down the stretch. 4-32. That was awful as a fan. Absolutely awful. I can remember I was managing for Domino's. I was asked, man, I was at MIT, a manager in training for Domino's Pizza on Kent Island in Stevensville, Maryland, that fall, summer and fall. Or no, I'm sorry. That was the previous year in 2001. That spring, I was managing the newly opened Domino's in Centerville, Maryland, and remember getting my picture in the paper and everything, and then moved to the Cambridge, Maryland store as a driver and shift runner. And in 2002, the Orioles had a little promise, but had an abysmal ending, and that was the worst year that I had as an Orioles fan. So no talk of war today, no talk about politics. I won't talk about the Supreme Court ruling regarding the gerrymandering of districts to give Democrats token black representation. We'll get into that some other time. But all gerrymandering is wrong, and now it feels like both parties are having a gerrymander-a-palooza, where if they just did districts logically and there was some type of a commission set up to do them fairly and impartially, that we wouldn't have this stupid argument. But power is what power is, and power does what power does. And this is what happens when you have a two-party system where they're fighting for power. And a third party is not a viable option because the first two parties control the mechanism. And it's a shame. But, like I said, we're past the point anywhere where I think we can vote our way out of this. We'll see what happens down the road, and I hope it doesn't come to violence. But I fear, it is one of my greater fears, that it will. So we'll just leave it at that. And wrap it up for the day. Final thought, if you're going to play in a role-playing game, role play. Don't be stupid, but play the part right. Play it right, play it well. Don't disrupt the table. Be part of the table. Become the table. Okay? And that's that. So if you're going to be at the table, be at the table. Okay? Put your phone away, and you'll have 10 times as much fun. I can tell you that right now. That was one of my rules whenever I ran a campaign. After cell phones became a big thing, put your phone the hell away. If I see you with it, then I might ask you to leave the table, because it means that I'm not interesting to you, and that the other players at the table do not keep your interest, and the game does not keep your interest. And if you're more interested in your phone, then maybe you and your phone should go sit over there in the corner. But that's going to wrap it up. Make sure to follow the show on Twitter. The handle is at the WSPD Podcast. More stuff is coming, and like I said, there's not enough time in the day, especially when you're ill. It's been one thing after another. I spent the whole month of April barely sleeping, and now the last week or so, I've just been sick off and on. I've had 4 migraines in 5 days, and it's been awful. But we're getting it done. We're plugging along. And you can help sponsor us through our Patreon page, where the Buddy the Elf sheet will come up for sponsors tonight. It's patreon.com/WSP Dragons. Join us there. Sponsorships start, as I've said before, at just $3 a month. And you can help us upgrade our equipment and pay our operating expenses, which is what the Patreon page does too, via direct donation by Cash App and Venmo. At Cash App and at Venmo, it's WSPD Pod. And as always, you can hear us on Spotify, where we began. Please follow us, as well as iHeartRadio, Audible, and Amazon. So thanks again for your time. This is Dave, your DM and your Emperor of the Nerds, signing off. We will talk again on Friday. We've got, of course, Patreon Live set up 2 days from now. Talk again on Friday in the podcast, and that's going to be probably live on YouTube. We're not sure yet. This was supposed to be, but we had some tech issues at the last minute, and it's all my fault. But there we go. Episode 37 is now in the books. Thanks a lot. Have a great week, and we will talk again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.